Hello, everyone. This is Upfront, where we have quick conversations about how to build a stronger organization by connecting with your frontline team who are critical to your success, but are often hard to reach and engage. Our guests are thought leaders who share real-life experiences and insights that you can actually put to work. No fluff, just real stuff at Upfront. I'm your host, Sonia Sapaban at Trivi, an easy AI-driven messaging and feedback tool with no apps or logins required. Your frontline will love Trivi, and your leaders will thrive with real-time insights and next steps. You can find information on how to connect with us in the show notes. Now, let's get on with our show. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Tunde Onadele, Vice President of Operations at Core Builders in San Jose, California. Welcome to Upfront, Tunde. So great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm
Absolutely.
looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. So we always like to start with talking a little bit about yourself and Core Builders so that the audience gets to know you a little bit. Can you share a little?
Sure. So my name is Tunde Onadele. As you mentioned, Vice President of Operations here at Core Builders. I've been in this industry for going on 13 years as a full-time professional. And I love every moment of it. Also want to shout out San Jose State University as my alumni. Go Spartans. And then as far as the role Core Builders, so we're a multifamily. We started off as a multifamily general contractor based in the Bay Area. Been in business for over 25 years. We also have a sister company that's a development arm. And really our initiative and mission is to build better communities. And that starts within the infrastructure that we build, but also within the people that we build and employ. And it's when you're passionate about building, it takes different shapes and forms. And so we believe that our visions of success lie within integrity, collaboration, and regularly achieving goals.
Yes, I know. We talked about it before. I was quite impressed with the amount of work you've done on just the team and communications, clear communications, having alignment. And you've clearly developed a disciplined approach to keeping projects aligned with owners that you work for, your internal leadership, and then also the subcontractors, your counterparts there, and field teams that you manage. What do you believe your organization has done especially well to maintain that alignment?
Yeah, I think what we've done well and what we will continue to focus on is really starting being aligned as a company. If our internal teams are aligned from me as operations down to our project executives to the PMs and superintendents who are in the front line running the day-to-day, if that same mission expectation is held, then it really allows us to project that externally to our clients and to our subcontractor partners that we rely on to complete work. And so that's been a focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the ways in which you do that? I mean, like, what are some approaches or specifics? We like to get down and dirty here.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much of the secret sauce, but I will say that, really for us, it's an ongoing process and there's no one size fits all. And so it's something that I'll say we're constantly refining, but some of the things that we do now, that there are some subs that need more hand holding. And so being mindful of that, saying we're going to do one-on-one meetings once a month or once a week, depending how heavy it is with a subcontractor, to just make sure expectations are aligned. Also, before we start any project, having a kickoff with them to set the standard and the tone, because I believe as you go into a project, it's one thing to have a executed agreement. It's another when it comes time to enforce it. And so by spending the time before you actually start work, when you could just focus and somewhat of the quiet, getting to know that subcontractor and relay their expectations and your expectations of them. So that way, when it comes time to actually perform the work, you can focus on that. But if should something go awry, you already have a foundation that you've established. And so I think that's been really helpful. And the final piece is really just not being afraid to escalate issues. I think that's an area that I am passionate about our teams like enforcing, because a lot of times you can have an issue that starts small and then it'll build, whether it's an issue of lack of communication, the PM and the superintendent are all on the same page, our deliverables aren't being hit. And if it continues to happen, day over day or week over week, it starts to compound. And then you look back 6 months later when you've lost X number of days on your schedule and X number of dollars, and ask yourself how it happened. And typically that's the culprit.
Yeah, no, I love to come back and talk about that, the compounding effect of miscommunication. But I also want to go back to the first point you made, which is really important, about planning, right? I mean, I remember in a recent conversation, I asked someone actually also in your industry, I was talking with Mehmet Genç, who is the director of operations for Europe at Turner Construction Company. And he made the point when I asked, what's the one thing you recommend, in terms of just making construction projects go smoother? He said planning. There's no substitute for that, right? I mean, really good plan up front and making sure everybody is in sync on the plan itself, right?
I agree. Timing is key, right? The one thing for our projects, it always boils down to two things: time and money, right? And there are occasions where you can use your money to buy more time. And if you use your time more effectively in the 6 months or year leading up to a project to plan and map out all the things, you'll be that much more better off, and you can use your money and time more effectively, as opposed to having to pay to stay ahead or just to maintain. And it's the one thing you can't really buy back in some regards, because once you're in construction, you're focused on executing the work. And so it's like trying to fly a plane and build it at the same time. It's not very practical, and it'd be suboptimal results most times.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was mostly in a manufacturing environment, as I've shared with you. And every minute, I used to say every minute that we spend on planning up front, we get the ROI in hours back, later on.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people just, rush to get started on a project, especially, a client is in a rush. We work mostly for the government at the time, and they were always, getting the budget through, and everything would take a long time. And as soon as the budget got approved, it was like, okay, let's go, and there's no time to plan. And we're like, no, we gotta.
Exactly.
So that's really important. But I also think that you make a great point about the compounding effect of miscommunication. I think you talked about death at 1,000 cuts, small communication gaps that can happen. And that's pretty common, right? And then that, over time, it translates into weeks or months of delay down the line. So again, I want to ask, what are some of the most common communication gaps that you've seen in the field? And, especially, with the subs or with the field teams. Just tell us a story or one or two examples of how they can create such significant downstream impacts on schedule, on quality, on accountability.
Yeah, I think there's an assumption that the conversations that are happening in the field are always being bubbled up. So, for example, we've had our superintendent and a foreman for a subcontractor set expectations of when materials should be procured, when it should be installed, where it should be staged on site, and you go through those logistics. But then on the management side, there are implications of that. Maybe they're storing it longer than they initially had in the budget, or when they wanted to procure it, the lead time has grown, and that information hasn't been communicated between the subcontractor, foreman, and project manager. And that's the gap. And it's painful because nobody's wrong per se. They're just having two separate conversations. And so really it's about a best practice for us is making sure that when we're having conversations with a foreman, that project manager is copied on all those conversations. And if there's something that's really of significance, especially a milestone, that we're just having a quick coordination with both sides. We can make sure that both sides of the house are aligned, for not only for their benefit, but for ours as well, because I don't want our superintendents to make a commitment and then it requires whether unforeseen costs or unforeseen logistical impact that wasn't accounted for. And then we have to ask ourselves, did we professionally manage this aspect of the project? And so having those coordinations and those communication touch bases, it may seem like another 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but to your previous point of like the ROI of having this coordination meeting now and being aligned is going to save us so much time down the road when we're, waiting on a long lead material item that we come to find out 6 weeks later was never actually ordered, or the wrong item was ordered because of a simple miscommunication. And so that measuring twice, cut once, it's as cliche as it is so true, and on the nose to really be successful, to help towards the success of something.
Yeah, that rings so true for me as well. So many times we had situations where, there's a supplier issue, whether it's a quality thing, something, a material or something is received and there's an issue with it, has to be sent back or reordered. And people will, invariably you ask them and they'll go, oh yeah, I told Bob or I told, Sarah or whatever, but they didn't think to tell someone else who may be in a different department, or, maybe that day they weren't there, they were just off, or they're taking their son to school in the morning and they got there late. And so there's all these, there's no real record. And a lot of it happens by phone calls or just verbal communications or even meetings. And the last thing, of course, people want to do on the floor, or in your case, at a job site, I'm sure, is have a meeting, right?
Yeah, because meetings are taken away from being able to execute the work.
Exactly.
But those meetings serve a purpose when used effectively, right? Too many meetings are a problem, but an effective meeting is invaluable. And so it's all about, is the meeting or conversation, or ultimately the communication, is it effective? Because if we're talking and everyone's talked themselves blue in the face, but we still leave that with ambiguity or uncertainty of what the next steps are, then we wasted everyone's time. And so striving for an effective meeting and an effective communication is really what it boils down to.
Yeah, and I know you're very big on that, right? Having efficient communications as well, right? So that it can be direct to the point. Of course, people have varying degrees of ability around that, right?
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of, I know there's text flying over the place, all over the place. There's conversations on phones or in meetings. And who knows what the level of real alignment is, right, across the board.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much. We're in an exciting time, right? There's a lot of solutions, tools, approaches, technologies available. What are your thoughts about, just different ways, new ways of creating better visibility and alignment? I mean, not to replace the meetings, but kind of like to put a bow on it and just say, make sure that everybody that should hear, like, some set of people always need to know about things, like your project manager, for example, right? And so what are some thoughts about, I know you're very thoughtful about new and better ways of always communicating, right? And making progress. What are some thoughts about that in terms of new and efficient ways of doing things?
Yeah, I go back and forth on like, I have even a small example. I used to have a notepad, pen and paper, right? And let's carry it tried and true. And then I called myself getting like my iPad and typing my notes. And I always found myself coming back to pen and paper. And there was a reason for that, because I think there's something to be said about just writing something down. And so some of the ways, I don't know if it's necessarily new, but the alternatives are like text messages are great, right? A lot of times in the field, people have text messages. The problem with text messages is that it lives within those two individuals. And from a contractual standpoint, like text message is not really a binding document in some regard. And so really, when I think about technology and how to use it, it's what is going to what can allow everyone who needs to get the message to get it. So not being afraid of that CC line on an email correspondence is huge, right? But also bigger than that, jumping on, Zoom and Google Meets, they're fantastic programs because it can allow you to get all the players, regardless of where they're at geographically, in one place to make sure that you're having one conversation one time, as opposed to 3 separate conversations in the telephone game. The last thing that we've somewhat implemented occasionally is I know there's like Read AI and other things that capture kind of elements of the meeting. Really, my preference for that, and I tell my project engineers, is that's a backstop. You can use that to support your own notes and what you're taking, just to make sure sometimes a meeting's moving really fast to see if you capture everything, but not as the end all be all. And so as much as like I love technology and these programs are going forward as far as to read intent and tone during a conversation, I come back to pen and paper. It's and picking up the phone, meeting in person, it's undefeated. It really is undefeated, and it's you can't go wrong with it.
Oh, well, that's definitely true. Um, you know, I will say this just a little bit just for fun here, right? The horse and the buggy was also proven, right? Everybody could use it. And
That's
yet when
true.
the car happened, those who were trying to get to the same place, if they only relied on, the horse and the buggy, it would take them a lot longer than somebody going in a car. So I think
Very true.
it has, today, I'll tell you, I actually was just at a conference in New York last week, and it was all about agents, AI agents and tools and things. And what occurred and what people talked about a lot was how there's this bifurcation, just like back in the day when internet first happened, and people were using, whatever they were doing before the internet, right? And some somewhat resisted it. Some went over to e-commerce and they started doing stuff on the internet. And some of those companies, we know we have some big examples of the ones that went out of business, right? And I'm not suggesting that at all for your business. You have a great business and you have a great model. But for our broader audience, none of us can sit this AI revolution out, and we cannot, because of just the speed of operation. If somebody comes on and they can work so much faster because they're also taking it, they're having the meetings, they're taking the notes, perhaps. I still do. I love that. I totally agree with you, by the way, about the pen and pencil. But it's at the same time, you have to have a good, healthy combination of these tools, and especially in industries like yours and manufacturing and hard industries where people are, it's harder to change in those environments because people are not as used to some technology, right? They haven't had to, and their main job isn't that. When your main job is mostly on emails and you're reading emails, doing all your work in with the back office operations on a desktop, it's a lot easier to get you to go into other technologies. So I get the
Absolutely.
with your operations.
Yeah.
That-
No, you're fair point. That's a very fair point. And then I think for a lot of the construction industry, and I'll speak for our company right now, for myself, it's really finding that balance. What makes sense, right? Because it's easy there's so many AI opportunities out there, and really it's taking the time to identify what is actually going to move the needle for us. And so in concurrently with that is making sure that things are still moving. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to exploring that more as we continue, because yeah, communication is only going to keep going towards that way. It's just really about how to make it efficient and effective.
Right. I will tell you, at the same conference, what struck me is that some people are just geeks, right? And they're just way out there using the kind of tools that frankly I'd be worried about, right? With little or no, I mean, they're building agents and things like this where there's little or no human involvement. And they even talked about, they have so many agents that one company they were talking about, their agents had asked to have their own conference by themselves. The agents, this is the AI agents.
That's it's hard to wrap your mind around, but yeah, I know entities that run without human interaction, and they just don't have that touch point. I think it's a matter of finding that sweet spot. But I'd be interested to see how the communication goes between a group of agents and what the outcome is.
Exactly. We asked about that, and they said, yeah, there was some interesting conversations that came out of that. So I totally agree with you, but that's only to say that there's some people way out there. And so all the rest of us need to kind of, have some engagement with that world and do what's right, each of us, for our own companies without going that far. I certainly don't think that that's appropriate for most companies.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. But
So let me ask you, if this is my last question, just really quick. We always like to leave the conversations with this. If there was only one thing you could change or recommend something to others to change to help, really the frontline workers do better and feel better about themselves and their work so that, they would also do better work, right? What would that be? Just one nugget. I call it a golden nugget.
golden nugget. I would say to have a guiding principle, right? And that guiding principle being centered around communication and feedback. Because a lot of times frontline workers, they see things immediately. And for me in my position, I may not hear about something for weeks or months later, but having that available feedback channel of this is something in real time that's affecting us, and bringing it to my level to be able to make a change, to create a structure or adjust a structure is key. Because there's nothing worse than somebody who's doing their best, they're working hard for the company, and the structure isn't supportive or conducive for them to be successful. And so leaders have a responsibility to make sure that structure is in place.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Most of the people leaders that we have these conversations with, they mention that they're convinced they only capture at best, and these are best in class companies, they probably capture 60 or 70% of what's going on the floor. And that's, again, the best in class. There's some other companies that is far less. But there's always that 20, 30% that is basically, the way we used to refer to it is just falls on the floor and nobody picks it up. See, verbal communication that was missed, somebody forgot, or something that, somebody notices, especially in quality and safety, they notice a loose wire or something like that. They think that, they need to tell someone, they can't see anybody. They say, well, next shift we'll pick it up, and then nobody does, somebody trips, or that creates a short or something. And it leads to all kinds of bad things. So
it compounds, right?
It compounds, exactly. I like that. I like the compounding communication effect that you have coined that now. Well, listen, I really enjoyed this, Tunde. Thanks again for joining me on the Upfront podcast. For our audience, if this episode has been helpful, please find us on Spotify to listen, or on YouTube to watch more episodes, and share it with others. If you need help connecting with your frontline or deskless employees and with communications like Tunde was talking about, see the show notes for information on how to connect with us at Trivy, or just email us at upfront@gotrivy.com. That's upfront@gotrivy.com. And bye for now, till the next episode.